The email from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA landed in my inbox at precisely 8 in the morning, and I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. Xavier Vance here, and I've been dealing with this particular homeowners association for 3 years now, ever since I bought my property on the edge of their jurisdiction in Henderson, Nevada. They've fined me for having my trash cans visible from the street, complained about the color of my front door being half a shade off their approved palette, and sent me no fewer than 17 notices about my lawn height being a quarter-inch too tall. So when I saw their email with the subject line, "Urgent Business Opportunity," my first instinct was to laugh, but I opened it anyway, because curiosity killed the cat, and I've never claimed to be smarter than a house cat. The email was from Karen Garrison herself, the HOA president and the bane of my existence. She'd been the one personally delivering most of those violation notices, always with that tight smile that never reached her eyes and her perfectly coiffed blonde bob that probably required an entire can of hairspray daily. The woman was in her late 40s, drove a white Lexus SUV, and had made it her life's mission to ensure every single property in Meadowbrook Estates adhered to her vision of suburban perfection. "Dear Mr. Vance," the email began, which was already suspicious because she usually just called me by my last name like we were in the military. "We at the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board would like to extend an invitation to discuss a mutually beneficial business arrangement. As you may know, our annual spring gala is scheduled for May 31st, and we find ourselves in need of a qualified caterer. We understand you operate the only licensed commercial kitchen within a 15-mile radius of our community. Would you be available to meet this Thursday at 2 o'clock to discuss the details? Regards, Karen Garrison, HOA President." I read it 3 times, certain I was missing something. These people had made my life difficult at every possible turn, and now they wanted to hire me. I ran my catering business, Vance Culinary Services, out of a commercial space I'd purchased 2 years ago, specifically because I was tired of the limitations of working from home. Getting that commercial kitchen license had been a nightmare of inspections, permits, and fees, but it had been worth it. My business had grown substantially, and I'd built a solid reputation in Henderson and the surrounding areas. The thing was, Karen wasn't wrong. There really wasn't another licensed commercial kitchen nearby. The next closest one was in downtown Las Vegas, which was a good 20 miles away and significantly more expensive. Most of the other caterers in the area operated out of restaurant kitchens or had to rent space, which limited their availability and drove up their costs. I called my business partner and best friend since college, Marcus Chen, who handled most of our logistics and scheduling. "You're not going to believe this," I said when he picked up. "The HOA wants to hire you," he said immediately. "How did you know?" "Dude, I got a call from some woman named Patricia Miller yesterday asking about our availability for the end of the month. She said she was on the HOA board. I told her we'd have to check with you, but I figured you'd want to hear it directly from the Dragon Lady herself." "Patricia called you? And then Karen emailed me?" "Sounds like they're desperate," Marcus said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "What are you going to do?" I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the email on my screen. "I'm going to that meeting. I want to hear what they have to say." "You're not actually going to help them, are you? After everything they've put you through?" "I'm a businessman, Marcus. If they're willing to pay my rates, I'm willing to listen." Thursday afternoon rolled around faster than I expected. I dressed in business casual, dark jeans and a button-down shirt, and drove the 5 minutes to the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. The place was exactly what you'd expect from an HOA with delusions of grandeur. A sprawling single-story building with perfectly manicured lawns, decorative fountains, and a parking lot where every space was clearly marked and probably enforced with the same zealotry they applied to everything else. Karen was waiting in the main conference room, along with 2 other board members I recognized from various HOA meetings I'd been forced to attend. Patricia Miller was a thin woman in her early 50s with steel gray hair and glasses that made her look like a librarian. The third was Donald Shaw, the only man on the board, who was in his 60s and always wore polo shirts tucked into khakis with a braided leather belt. "Mr. Vance, thank you for coming," Karen said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, professional, and I noticed she'd gone for the full business suit today. Navy blue, probably expensive. "Please have a seat," I sat across from them, folding my hands on the table. "I'll be honest, I was surprised to get your email. I'm sure you were, Karen said, and for just a moment, something that might have been embarrassment crossed her face. We find ourselves in a difficult situation, and we're hoping we can set aside our past differences for a mutually beneficial arrangement. What kind of situation? I asked. Patricia spoke up, her voice clipped and efficient. We had a caterer booked for our spring gala for months. Signature events based out of Las Vegas. They came highly recommended and we paid a substantial deposit. Last week they informed us they're shutting down operations immediately due to bankruptcy. We've been scrambling to find a replacement, but everyone we've contacted is either already booked, doesn't have the proper licensing, or is prohibitively expensive. And then someone pointed out that you have a commercial kitchen license, Donald added, right here in Henderson, practically in our backyard. I nodded slowly, processing this. Tell me about the event. How many people? What kind of food are you looking for? What's your budget? Karen pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. We're expecting approximately 200 guests. The gala is our biggest fundraiser of the year. We typically serve a 3-course dinner, open bar with wine and champagne, and various hors d'oeuvres during the cocktail hour. Our budget for catering was set at $40,000, which is what we had allocated for signature events. I opened the folder and scanned through the details. The menu they'd planned was ambitious. Bacon-wrapped scallops and mini beef Wellingtons for appetizers, a choice of filet mignon or pan-seared salmon for the main course, and a dessert course that included individual chocolate lava cakes and a tiered cake for display. This wasn't a casual backyard barbecue. This was high-end event catering. This is a lot of work for a week's notice, I said. The event is May 31st, that's 6 days away. We're aware it's short notice, Karen said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. We're prepared to discuss compensation for the rush. $40,000 was probably fair for signature events with months of preparation, I said, setting the folder down. For 6 days' notice, with this menu and this many people, my quote would be $60,000. That includes all food, service staff, rental equipment, and setup and breakdown. Given the timeline, I'd need 50% up front and the remainder the day of the event. The three of them exchanged glances. Donald cleared his throat. That's significantly more than we budgeted. You're asking me to completely clear my schedule, source ingredients on extremely short notice, coordinate rental equipment, hire and train temporary staff, and execute a high-end menu for 200 people in less than a week, I said calmly. $60,000 is actually generous considering the circumstances. Most caterers would quote you $80 or simply tell you it's impossible. Patricia frowned, tapping her pen against her notepad. We'd need to call an emergency board meeting to approve that kind of expense. That's fine, I said. But I need an answer by tomorrow morning. If you want me to pull this off, I need to start procurement and planning immediately. Every hour we delay makes the job harder. Karen's jaw tightened, but she nodded. We'll have an answer for you by 8 a.m. tomorrow. I stood, shaking hands with each of them. I'll wait to hear from you. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. These people had spent years making my life difficult over trivial matters, and now they needed me. The power dynamic had shifted, and they knew it. Marcus was waiting for me back at the commercial kitchen, sitting at the small desk we used for administrative work. Well, they want the full upscale treatment for 200 people, 6 days from now. I quoted them $60,000. He whistled low. Did they go for it? They need to have an emergency board meeting. I'll know tomorrow morning. I grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator and leaned against the counter. The thing is, if they agree, this is going to be insane. We'd need to bring in at least 10 additional staff members, rent extra equipment, and I'd have to call in every favor I have with our suppliers to get quality ingredients on this timeline. Are you sure you want to do this? Marcus asked. I mean, beyond the satisfaction of watching them squirm? It's a huge payday, I said, and if we pull it off, it's massive exposure. Their gala attracts wealthy people from all over the area, the kind of clients who could keep us booked solid for the next year. Fair point, Marcus conceded. So what's our game plan if they say yes? We spent the next 2 hours mapping out a preliminary plan. Marcus would handle equipment rentals and staff hiring. I'd focus on the menu planning and supplier coordination. We made lists, checked our existing inventory, and started reaching out to our regular temporary staff to see who'd be available for a rush job at premium pay. At 7:45 the next morning, my phone rang. Karen's number flashed on the screen. "Mr. Vance, the board has approved your quote," she said without preamble. "We can have the $30,000 deposit transferred to your business account today." "Good," I said, already pulling up my laptop. "I'll send over the contract within the hour. I need it signed and returned by noon, along with confirmation of the deposit transfer." "That won't be a problem," Karen said. There was a pause, and then she added, "I want to be clear that we expect professional service despite our past issues." "Ms. Garrison, when I'm working, I'm all business," I said. "Your event will get the same level of quality and attention I give to every client. You have my word on that." "Thank you," she said, and she actually sounded sincere. "We'll be in touch if we have any questions." The moment I hung up, I called Marcus. "It's on. Get everyone on the phone. We're doing this." The next 6 days were absolute chaos. I've handled rush jobs before, but nothing quite like this. My first call was to my primary produce supplier, Angelo's Fresh Market, where I'd been a loyal customer for years. Angelo himself answered the phone. "Xavier, my friend, what can I do for you?" "Angelo, I need a miracle. I've got an event for 200 people in 6 days, and I need top quality everything. Can you make it happen?" There was a pause, and I could almost hear him calculating. "For you? Yes, but it's going to cost extra for the rush sourcing." I expected that. I need asparagus, baby potatoes, mixed greens, cherry tomatoes, fresh herbs, everything. I'll send you the full list within the hour. Done. My seafood supplier was next, then my butcher, then the bakery that supplied our specialty items. Everyone was willing to work with me, but the premium for rush orders added up quickly. I'd built these relationships over years of consistent business and prompt payments, and now those relationships were paying off. Marcus found us 8 experienced servers through our network, along with 2 additional prep cooks. We were running training sessions in the evening after our regular work was done, going over the menu, the service style, and the expectations for the event. The menu required some adjustments from what Karen had originally planned with signature events. Some ingredients were simply impossible to source in time, so I made substitutions that maintained the upscale feel while being more realistic. The mini beef Wellingtons became mushroom and brie phyllo cups, which were actually more impressive visually and easier to execute in large quantities. The bacon-wrapped scallops stayed because I found a supplier who could deliver, but I added prosciutto-wrapped asparagus as an additional option to ensure we had enough variety. On day 3 of the preparation, Karen showed up at my commercial kitchen unannounced. I was in the middle of testing the chocolate lava cake recipe, trying to get the timing perfect so the center would be molten without the cake falling apart. The kitchen was a controlled disaster of mixing bowls, ingredient containers, and sheet pans. "Ms. Garrison," I said, looking up from my work, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I wanted to check on the progress," she said, looking around the kitchen with what appeared to be genuine interest. "This is quite an operation you have." "We're a professional catering company," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "Did you need something specific?" She hesitated, which was unusual for her. Karen Garrison never hesitated. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally, "for the way the HOA has treated you over the past few years." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The violations, the fines, the constant notices. Looking back, we were overly harsh with you. You've always maintained your property well, and we nitpicked over things that didn't really matter." She met my eyes, and I saw something that looked like genuine remorse. "I wanted to say that before the event. Regardless of how the gala goes, I owe you that apology." I set down my mixing spoon and leaned against the counter. "Why the change of heart?" "Because I realized that we need people like you in our community," she said. "Small business owners, people who actually contribute something beyond just living in a nice house and complaining about their neighbors. You built this from nothing, and instead of supporting you, we made your life harder. That was wrong." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. This was so far from the Karen Garrison I'd dealt with for years that I half wondered if this was some kind of elaborate prank. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "And for what it's worth, I'm committed to making your gala a success. This is a big deal for you all, and I take that seriously." She smiled, a real smile this time, not the tight professional mask she usually wore. "Thank you. Is there anything we can do to help with the preparation?" "Actually, Yes, I need to do a site visit at the venue to plan the setup. Can you meet me there tomorrow afternoon? I'll need to see the kitchen facilities, if there are any, and figure out the logistics of serving 200 people. I'll be there at 2 o'clock, she said. And Xavier? She used my first name, which she'd never done before. Thank you for taking this on. We really are grateful. After she left, Marcus emerged from the walk-in cooler where he'd been organizing supplies. Did I just hear correctly? Did the Ice Queen apologize? Apparently desperation makes people reflective, I said, but I was smiling. Come on, we've got work to do. The venue site visit the next day revealed both good news and bad news. The good news was that the Meadowbrook Estates event hall was spacious and well appointed, with plenty of room for seating, a decent sound system, and beautiful lighting. The bad news was that the kitchen facilities were minimal, basically just a small prep area with a couple of burners and a residential-grade oven. We'll have to bring everything in hot and keep it in warming units, I told Karen as we walked through the space. The serving stations will go here and here. I pointed to 2 areas flanking the main hall. We'll set up a bar station in the corner, and the dessert table can go along this wall. Whatever you need, Karen said. We'll have tables and chairs delivered the morning of the event, and the decorating committee will handle centerpieces and linens. Good. My team will arrive at noon to start setup. Service begins at 7 with cocktail hour, dinner at 8, and we'll have dessert out by 9:30. We'll need access to the kitchen area and storage rooms from noon until we finish cleanup, probably around midnight. She made notes on her tablet, nodding along. That all sounds fine. The event officially runs until 11, so you should have plenty of time for cleanup after guests leave. Over the next 2 days, everything came together in a carefully choreographed dance of preparation. We prepared what we could in advance, things that would hold well or could be quickly finished on site. The salmon was portioned and seasoned, ready to be seared. The fillets were trimmed and prepared for their final cooking. Desserts were partially assembled, waiting for the final touches. The phyllo cups were baked and stored carefully, ready to be filled just before serving. The day before the event, I barely slept. My mind kept running through the timeline, checking and rechecking every detail. At 3 a.m, I was at the commercial kitchen doing a final inventory check, making sure we had backups for everything and redundancies for our redundancies. Marcus found me there at 6, staring at my checklist like it held the secrets of the universe. You need to sleep, man. I will, after tomorrow. Xavier, we've done everything we can do. The prep is done, the staff is trained, the equipment is reserved. You've triple-checked everything. At some point, you have to trust that we're ready. He was right, of course. I went home, managed to sleep for a few hours, and woke up at 10 feeling surprisingly refreshed. Game day energy, I told myself. This was what I'd been working toward. We arrived at the venue at noon, sharp, our catering van and Marcus's truck both loaded with equipment, food, and supplies. The rental company had already delivered the warming units, extra tables for our service stations, and the portable bar setup. Our staff started arriving at 12:30, and by 1 o'clock, we were in full setup mode. The transformation of the event hall was remarkable. The decorating committee had done an impressive job with the space, turning it into an elegant venue with white linens, gold accents, and floral centerpieces that probably cost more than my first car. Our service stations fit seamlessly into the design, professional and polished. By 5 o'clock, we had everything in place. The appetizers were ready to go, the main courses were prepared and waiting in warming units, and the desserts looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. I gathered my team for a final briefing. Okay, everyone, this is it, I said, looking at the 10 staff members who'd been working alongside Marcus and me. You all know your stations and your responsibilities. Remember, this is a high-end event with guests who expect perfection. We're professionals, and we're going to show them exactly what that means. Questions? One of the servers, a young woman named Jessica, who I'd worked with on several events, raised her hand. What about dietary restrictions? I know we have the vegetarian options, but what if someone has allergies? Good question. We have cards at each station listing all major allergens. If someone asks about something specific, get me or Marcus immediately. Don't guess, don't improvise. We have backup options for most common restrictions. I looked around at the group. Anything else? Heads shook. They looked nervous but ready, which was exactly how I felt. Karen arrived at 6:30, dressed in an elegant floor-length gown that probably cost more than I'd made in my first month of business. She looked around the space with wide eyes. "This is incredible," she said, walking over to where I was doing a final check of the appetizer station. "You've really outdone yourself." "The night isn't over yet," I said, but I was pleased. Everything looked perfect, and I knew the food was going to be outstanding. "Still, thank you. This means more to us than you probably realize." The guests started arriving at 7, and cocktail hour began. My servers moved through the crowd with trays of appetizers, and I watched from my position near the kitchen area, monitoring everything with a critical eye. The prosciutto-wrapped asparagus was disappearing quickly. The phyllo cups were getting excellent reactions. Everything was going according to plan. Then, at 7:40, Patricia Miller rushed into the kitchen area, her face pale. "We have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The entertainment canceled. The string quartet that was supposed to play during dinner just called. Their van broke down on the highway, and they won't make it. Karen is having a meltdown." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't my problem, technically. I was the caterer, not the event planner. But I also knew that if this gala fell apart, my reputation would suffer, regardless of whether it was my fault. "Does anyone in your organization have music equipment?" I asked. "A decent sound system? A laptop with a music library?" "I don't know, maybe. Why?" "Because if you can get me a good sound system and a laptop, I can put together a playlist that will work for dinner service. It won't be live music, but it'll be professional and appropriate." Patricia grabbed my arm. "You would do that?" "I'm already here, and I want this event to succeed. But you need to move fast. We're supposed to start seating for dinner in 20 minutes. She practically ran off, and I turned to Marcus. "Please tell me you have your laptop in the truck." "Always. Why?" "I need you to pull up every classical and jazz playlist you can find. We're about to become the entertainment." 10 minutes later, we had a borrowed sound system set up, Marcus's laptop connected, and a carefully curated playlist ready to go. It wasn't what they'd planned, but it was better than awkward silence or whatever pop music might have been playing on the venue's default system. Dinner service went smoothly. The guests were seated at 8, and my team executed the meal service flawlessly. The fillets were cooked to perfection, the salmon was beautifully presented, and I heard multiple compliments as I moved through the space, checking on different tables. Karen caught me near the end of the main course, pulling me aside. "The music situation, Patricia told me what you did." "Thank you." "Just trying to make sure the night is a success," I said. "How's everything else going?" "Better than I could have hoped. We've raised almost $70,000 so far from the silent auction and donations. This is our best gala ever." The dessert service was the finale, and we went all out. Each table received a platter of the individual chocolate lava cakes, still warm, with fresh berries and a dusting of powdered sugar. The tiered display cake was cut and served to guests who wanted seconds. I'd also prepared a selection of petite fours and chocolate truffles that weren't in the original menu, just because I knew they'd photograph well and add an extra touch of luxury. By 10 o'clock, the event was winding down, and I finally allowed myself to relax slightly. We'd done it. Everything had gone perfectly, or as close to perfect as any event ever gets. My team was already starting the subtle process of clearing stations and preparing for breakdown. Donald Shaw approached me as I was overseeing the final dessert service. "Mr. Vance, I wanted to personally thank you. This has been extraordinary. The food, the service, your professionalism, even when we had the music crisis, you went above and beyond." "I appreciate that, Mr. Shaw. I'm glad everything met your expectations." "More than met them, exceeded them considerably." He paused, then added, "I own a commercial real estate development company, and we have several events throughout the year. I'd like to discuss bringing you on as our preferred caterer if you're interested." I kept my expression professional, but internally I was celebrating. This was exactly the kind of connection I'd hoped for. I'd be very interested in that conversation. Here's my card. As the last guests filtered out around 10:30, Karen gathered the board members and came over to where I was coordinating the cleanup. "Xavier, we'd like to settle the remaining payment now, if that's acceptable." "Of course." I pulled up the invoice on my phone and sent it to her email. "The balance is $30,000, as agreed." She pulled out her phone and made the transfer right there. Done. And I've added a gratuity of $5,000 for you and your team. You earned it. I was genuinely surprised. That's very generous. Thank you. We should be thanking you, Patricia said. You saved our event. Without you, this would have been a disaster. The cleanup took us until midnight, but we left the venue spotless, every piece of equipment loaded, every surface cleaned. My staff was exhausted but happy, and I made sure to add generous bonuses to their pay from the gratuity Karen had provided. Marcus and I were the last to leave, doing a final walkthrough to make sure we hadn't missed anything. That was insane, he said as we stood in the empty parking lot. But we did it. We really did, I agreed. And based on the contacts I made tonight, I think we're going to be very busy for the next few months. We drove back to the commercial kitchen in comfortable silence, both too tired for much conversation. As I was unloading the van, my phone buzzed with an email. It was from Karen, sent to my business address. Xavier, I wanted to send you a proper thank you now that the chaos has ended. Your professionalism, skill, and grace under pressure were remarkable. You didn't just cater our event, you saved it. Beyond the business relationship, I want you to know that I've called an emergency HOA board meeting for next week to review our enforcement policies. The way we treated you was unacceptable, and we're going to make changes to ensure we're not harassing homeowners over trivial matters. You've been a valuable member of our community, and it took almost losing you to make us realize that. I hope we can build a better relationship going forward. With sincere gratitude, Karen Garrison. I read it twice, then showed it to Marcus. Character development, he said with a grin. Who would have thought? People surprise you sometimes, I said, in good ways and bad. The week after the gala was a whirlwind. I received 7 inquiries about catering services, all referrals from people who'd attended the Meadowbrook Estates event. Donald Shaw's company reached out to book us for 3 upcoming corporate events. A couple who'd been guests asked about catering their daughter's wedding in the fall. But the most interesting development came from the HOA itself. Karen sent out a community-wide email announcing policy changes. The board had voted to eliminate fines for minor infractions, establish a more reasonable appeal process for violations, and create a community support program to help homeowners with improvements rather than just penalizing them for perceived problems. The email specifically mentioned me, acknowledging that their treatment of my property had been overly aggressive and not in keeping with the spirit of community building we should be fostering. It wasn't quite a public apology, but it was close enough that several of my neighbors reached out to congratulate me on apparently winning the war with the HOA. 2 weeks after the gala, Karen called me directly. Xavier, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. The board has been discussing ways to better support local businesses and create a sense of community. We'd like to host a monthly community dinner, nothing formal, just a chance for residents to gather and socialize. We were wondering if you'd be interested in catering these events. Nothing on the scale of the gala, maybe 50 people, casual food, reasonable budget. We'd pay your normal rates, and it would be good recurring business for you. I thought about it for a moment. The old me, the guy who'd been battling the HOA for 3 years, would have been suspicious. But the past 2 weeks had shown me that people really could change when they wanted to. I'd be interested, I said. Let me put together a proposal for a few different menu options at various price points, and we can discuss it. Perfect. Thank you, Xavier. I mean it. The first community dinner happened a month later, and it was surprisingly pleasant. Casual barbecue food, nothing fancy, but well executed and delicious. About 60 residents showed up, including several who went out of their way to tell me they'd always admired my business and were glad the HOA had finally pulled their heads out of their collective backsides. Those weren't their exact words, but that was the sentiment. Donald Shaw attended with his wife, and he introduced me to several other business owners in the community. By the end of the evening, I had 3 more catering inquiries and an invitation to join a local business association. My business partner Marcus and I were cleaning up after that first community dinner when he said, "You know, this whole thing is kind of crazy when you think about it. 6 months ago, you hated these people. Now you're their preferred caterer and apparently part of the community leadership." "I don't know about leadership," I said, scraping plates into a trash bag. "But yeah, it's weird how things worked out." Do you think the HOA really changed, or are they just being nice because they need you? It was a fair question, and I'd been thinking about it myself. I think it's both. They needed me, which forced them to actually see me as a person instead of just a property to manage. And once they did that, they realized how ridiculous some of their policies were. Whether the change sticks long term, who knows? But for now, I'll take it. The monthly community dinners became a regular thing, and I started seeing familiar faces around the neighborhood who would wave or stop to chat instead of just driving past. The HOA violations stopped completely, not just for me but for most of the neighborhood. Karen had apparently taken her newfound perspective and run with it, transforming the board from a group of petty enforcers to actual community organizers. 3 months after the gala, I was invited to speak at an HOA board meeting about small business development in residential communities. Karen introduced me to the full audience of residents, about 80 people packed into the community center. Many of you know Xavier Vance as our neighbor and the talented caterer who has been making our community events so successful, she said from the podium. But what you might not know is that we almost lost him because of our own short-sightedness. Today, he's going to talk about how HOAs can better support entrepreneurs and small business owners in our communities. I spent 20 minutes talking about the challenges of running a business from a residential area, the importance of having flexibility in HOA rules, and how supporting local businesses strengthens the whole community. I kept it conversational and practical, sharing my own experiences without making it sound like a complaint session. The Q&A afterward was lively, with several residents asking about starting their own small businesses and wanting to know what resources were available. A woman named Linda Martinez, who lived 3 streets over, approached me afterward. "I've been wanting to start a home-based graphic design business for years," she said, "but I was always afraid the HOA would give me trouble about having clients come to my house for meetings. After hearing you speak, I think I'm actually going to do it." "That's great," I said. "And honestly, if you run into any issues, talk to Karen. She's actually reasonable now, which is something I never thought I'd say." Karen overheard that last comment and laughed. I deserved that. "But yes, Linda, please come talk to me. We're trying to create an environment where people can thrive, not just comply." As the summer went on, my business continued to grow. The connections I'd made through the gala and the community dinners led to more corporate events, several weddings, and even a request to cater a major fundraiser for a local charity. Marcus and I hired 2 full-time employees and were considering expanding our commercial kitchen space. The relationship with the HOA evolved into something I never expected, a genuine partnership. When they wanted to organize a neighborhood block party, they consulted with me on food options and logistics. When a new family moved into the neighborhood and wanted recommendations for local businesses, I was on the referral list. When they revised their community guidelines, they asked me to review the sections related to home-based businesses. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when the old HOA mentality would creep back in, someone complaining about something minor or trying to enforce a rule that didn't make sense. But Karen and the rest of the board had genuinely committed to being better, and it showed. 6 months after the gala, I was working in my commercial kitchen on a Saturday afternoon when Karen called. "Xavier, I need your help with something, and it's not catering related." "Okay," I'm intrigued. "The Regional HOA Association is having their annual conference next month, and they've asked me to give a presentation on community building and conflict resolution. I want to use our story, yours and mine, as the case study. Would you be willing to co-present with me?" I set down the knife I'd been using to prep vegetables. "You want me to stand in front of a room full of HOA presidents and talk about how badly your board treated me?" "Yes, exactly that. Because the transformation we've gone through, the way we changed our approach and built something better, that's a story worth sharing. HOAs across the country have the same problems we had. They focus on enforcement instead of community, rules instead of relationships. If we can show them there's a better way, maybe we can help other people avoid the mistakes we made." I thought about the Xavier Vance from a year ago, the guy who would have jumped at any chance to publicly call out the HOA's nonsense. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I'd learned that people could change, that grudges were exhausting, and that sometimes the best revenge was actually just success and moving forward. "I'll do it," I said, "but But I get to tell the story honestly, including the parts where you were absolutely terrible to deal with." She laughed. "I wouldn't want it any other way. That's what makes the story worth telling." The conference presentation ended up being one of the most satisfying things I'd ever done professionally. Standing in front of 200 HOA board members from across Nevada and California, I told them about the trash can violations, the door color complaints, the lawn height notices, all of it. Karen stood beside me and acknowledged every bit of it, explaining how their focus on rigid enforcement had nearly cost them a valuable community member and how changing their approach had strengthened the entire neighborhood. The response was overwhelming. We had a line of people waiting to talk to us afterward, board members from other communities wanting to know how they could implement similar changes. Several asked for copies of Meadowbrook Estates' revised community guidelines. One woman from a community in Northern California actually started crying, saying she'd been feeling like a terrible person for enforcing rules she didn't even believe in, and our presentation had given her permission to push for change. Karen and I drove back to Henderson together after the conference, both exhausted but energized by the response. "Thank you for doing that," she said as she pulled off the highway. "I know it wasn't easy to relive some of those conflicts." "Actually, it was easier than I expected," I said, "because we're not those people anymore. You're not the petty HOA president, and I'm not the angry homeowner. We're both just people trying to do better." "When did you become so philosophical?" she asked, but she was smiling. "Probably around the same time you became reasonable. We've both had quite the character arc this year." As fall approached and the one-year anniversary of the Gala neared, the HOA board approached me about catering their next major fundraiser. This time, it wasn't an emergency. They had 6 months' notice, a healthy budget, and realistic expectations. We had a planning meeting where we collaborated on menu options, discussed themes, and worked out logistics like civilized professionals who respected each other. Patricia Miller summed it up perfectly during that meeting. "It's amazing what we can accomplish when we're not all busy being terrible to each other." The annual spring gala became a regular contract for me, along with the monthly community dinners and occasional special events. My business grew to the point where Marcus and I opened a second location, this one actually in Las Vegas proper, expanding our reach and capacity. We hired a full staff, including a talented sous chef who took over much of the day-to-day cooking, allowing me to focus more on business development and client relationships. The HOA story became part of my business's origin narrative, the tale I'd tell potential clients about how we'd grown from a small operation to a thriving catering company. People loved the underdog angle, the idea that the same HOA that had once harassed me was now my biggest supporter and most consistent client. But more than the business success, what really mattered was the community we'd built. The monthly dinners weren't just catering gigs, they were genuine social events where neighbors connected, friendships formed, and people looked out for each other. Linda Martinez did start her graphic design business and was thriving. 2 other residents opened home-based businesses with the HOA's support. The neighborhood felt alive in a way it hadn't before. Karen and I became actual friends, which would have seemed impossible during those early years of conflict. We'd grab coffee sometimes and talk about business, community issues, or just life in general. She told me once that confronting her behavior as HOA president had made her re-examine a lot of other areas of her life, leading to positive changes in her personal relationships and her approach to her own career in real estate management. "You kind of saved me," she said during one of those coffee meetings. "Not just the HOA, but me personally. I was turning into someone I didn't like, someone who got satisfaction from controlling other people. Having to ask for your help, having to admit we'd been wrong, that was humbling. I needed that." "We saved each other," I said. I was getting bitter and angry, letting the HOA conflicts consume way too much mental energy. Having to work with you, having to let go of that grudge, that was good for me too. As I write this now, 2 years after that first desperate email from Karen about catering the gala, I'm sitting in my expanded commercial kitchen watching my team prep for tomorrow's events. We're catering a wedding for 250 guests, a corporate luncheon for a law firm, and yes, the monthly Meadowbrook Estates community dinner. My relationship with the HOA went from adversarial to professional to genuinely collaborative. They're not just clients now, they're partners in building something better. The neighborhood has become a model for other communities, hosting visits from HOA boards who want to learn how to transform their own approaches. And it all started because I owned the only commercial kitchen license near our HOA, and they were desperate enough to set aside their pride and ask for help. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of forcing people to confront their issues and grow. Sometimes the worst conflicts lead to the best outcomes. I'm not naive enough to think everything is perfect now. There are still disagreements, still moments of tension, still challenges in balancing community standards with individual freedom. But we've built a foundation of mutual respect and open communication that makes those challenges manageable. The commercial kitchen license that used to be just a business necessity became the catalyst for transformation, not just for my business, but for an entire community. And that's worth more than any catering contract, any amount of money, or any satisfaction I might have gotten from holding on to old grudges. Marcus walked into the kitchen just now, holding his phone. "You're not going to believe this. We just got an inquiry from a HOA in Arizona. They heard about our work with Meadowbrook Estates and want us to fly out for a consultation about transforming their community approach and catering their events." I grinned. "Set up the call. Let's see if we can export this particular kind of magic." Because at the end of the day, that's what this story really is. Magic. The magic of people choosing to be better, of bridges built instead of burned, of communities that thrive when we focus on connection instead of control. The magic of second chances and new beginnings. And it all started with a desperate email, a commercial kitchen license, and two stubborn people who eventually learned that collaboration beats confrontation every single time. The sun was setting over Henderson as I locked up the commercial kitchen for the night, the Nevada sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new events, new opportunities. But tonight, I was content with how far we'd all come. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "Community dinner planning meeting Tuesday at 7. We're thinking of adding a fall festival and would love your input on food options." I replied quickly. "I'll be there. Got some ideas for autumn-themed appetizers that would be perfect." 2 years ago, I would have deleted that text and gone back to being angry. Today, I was excited to collaborate with people who had become genuine friends and partners. That transformation, more than anything else in this entire story, was the real victory. And as I drove home through the Meadowbrook Estates neighborhood, past houses that had once represented nothing but conflict and stress, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had forced growth, for the people who had chosen to change, and for the unexpected journey that had led from animosity to authentic community. The HOA still existed, still had rules and standards and expectations, but now those things served the community instead of controlling it, and that made all the difference.